Hi, this is Paul. I'm an educator, a graduate student in language literacy and culture at the University of California, and occasional columnist at multiversitycomics.com. I'm a Patreon supporter of the Comics Alternative because I really value the coverage that Derek, Andy, and Gwen, and Sean, and Gene, and Shay, and all the others provide of what I think is one of the most vibrant and vital media that we have in our global society, which is comics. I appreciate the depth and the range of their coverage and their analysis, and I think they provide a vital service to the comics reading community. If you feel the same way, if you value this work too, I encourage you to go to patreon.com/comicsalternative and to be a supporter as well. Thank you for listening, and have fun.
This is the Comics Alternative for young readers. Reviews of Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales, Alamo All-Stars, The Nameless City, and Paper Girls, Volume 1.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative for Young Readers. I'm Andy.
And I'm Gwen, and we're two people with PhDs talking about comics.
That's right. And on this episode of the Comics Alternative for Young Readers, we're going to take a look at 3 new books. Alamo All-Stars, which is a Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales book by Nathan Hale. The Nameless City by Faith Erin Hicks. And Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chang. But before we go any further, we'd like you to know that this episode of the Comics Alternative is brought to you by the fine folks at Discount Comic Book Service. When you go to dcbservice.com, you'll find all of your pre-ordering needs right there in front of you. Everything you could possibly imagine. There's DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles for 40% off. For other publishers, you'll find discounts of 20 to 35% off. And sometimes the DCBS specials are at 45 to 50% off the cover price. And a lot of times, Gwen, the discounts go even higher than that.
This is true, and this month we have a couple of great kids bundles that we want to tell you about. The first is the Marvel bundle, and it has Marvel Universe Guardians of the Galaxy number 9, Marvel Universe Ultimate Spider-Man Contest of Champions number 4, and Marvel Universe Avengers Assemble Civil War number 4, and you get all those comics for just $4.47, which is 50% off the list price. And the DC bundle has, of course, my beloved Scooby-Doo Where Are You number 70, Teen Titans Go number 16, and Looney Tunes number 231. That Looney Tunes, it just keeps on ticking.
Yeah, you can't keep them down.
You cannot. Daffy Duck will let you know. Those 3 comics for just $4.47. Again, 50% off of the cover price. So those are some really great deals on the kids bundles. You know, for under $10, you can get 6 comics for your young reader. So we recommend it.
Yeah, it's such a great deal.
Absolutely.
And when you do order with DCB Service, please be sure to tell them that the 2 people with PhDs sent you.
That's right. Well, you know what? You sound great, Andy. So it seems to me like you are over your cold.
Yes. How about you?
I am on cold numero 2, and I'm doing okay, but I know I sound a little congested today. But one of the things that often helps is a warm beverage when you're not feeling well. Da-da-da-da.
Oh, could that be a prompt for or something that we... Oh, yes, it is. We also want to tell you about a great sponsor that we have at the Comics Alternative, Just Coffee Co-op. And Just Coffee is a company that offers 100% fair trade, shade-grown, organic, certified coffee. Just Coffee Co-op's coffee is roasted in small batches, so there's none of the mass production stuff that's usually not so good, and it's all made to order. So, and the best part is there's no minimum order, and the shipping is free. So all you need to do is to go to their website, justcoffee.coop, and when you check out, you can use our coupon code COMICS. That's going to give you a 10% discount off your order, and it's going to help support the podcast. So please do go to their website and get caffeinated. That's justcoffee.coop.
Well, now, I also understand that if we had a comics alternative bugle, I would play it because you have announcements, don't you?
I do have a couple of announcements, and even though these are for local events where I am in Maryland, hopefully they'll be of interest to other people as well. We are very, very proud in Anne Arundel County to have our very first Anne Arundel County Public Library Comic-Con.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, we're super excited. I mean, a bunch of librarians got together about this time last year and thought, wouldn't it be cool to have our own Comic-Con, because there's so many comics lovers in the library world. So we're going to hold our first Comic-Con on Saturday, May the 14th, at the Odenton Library in Odenton, Maryland, from 10 to 3. And I'll put a link in the show notes in case anybody lives nearby and wants to join us. We would love to have you join us. There'll be all kinds of events there. There's going to be like a cosplay contest. There's going to be creators, people talking about how to create comics. It's going to be really, really cool. Not on a large scale, but it's going to be fun. And one of the things I'm most excited about is I'm going to be there with my microphone, and I'm going to be talking with a lot of young people, and I want to get their thoughts on not only what they think about the Comic-Con, but the types of books that they're reading.
Right. That will be so exciting.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to that.
And, our listeners might want to bring their kids to this. And Maryland is so near to so many other states, right? I mean, aren't you just like right next door to like Pennsylvania and New Jersey and Delaware?
New Jersey, Delaware, Virginia, D.C. I mean, there's so many places. And there's a comic convention in, they used to have one in Annapolis, and I think now it's kind of been absorbed by D.C. And I would go to that and see and talk to people from many different states. So, the geography here on the East Coast, nothing's really too far away. So I'm hoping we'll get a big turnout from people not just in Maryland.
So if we have some kid listeners right now who live in that area, you could meet Andy Wolverton, which right. I haven't even gotten to do yet in person. And
we're working on that. We're going to correct that. But yeah, I would love to. If you are a young reader, I would love to talk to you about what you are reading, and even if it's things that we don't mention on the show, whatever you're reading, we want to know what you're reading, and that will actually help us to know, what our listeners are listening for.
Absolutely.
So that's cool. Also, a few days before that, this is for the adults, I'll be giving a presentation for grown-ups called What Are Graphic Novels? And that's going to be at my library, the Severna Park Library, where I work. And that's going to be on Monday, May the 9th at 7 p.m. And again, this is a program for adults that will focus on what graphic novels are and why they're not only fun, but why they're important. I'll put a link in the show notes for that as well. But, Gwen, we really don't know who's listening to our podcast. We hope it's, I kind of hope it's a combination of adults and young people, but I encountered a lot of adults that really either don't get what graphic novels are, and they don't really know what they can do, that type of thing. It's not that they have a negative feeling toward them. They just don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's just, hearing someone talk about the language and terminology that we use when we talk about comics and getting an understanding of just the wide variety of comics that are available to readers can really be eye-opening for especially parents and teachers who want to share those. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, Andy, but I had asked my students a couple weeks ago, my college-age students, how many of them read comics, and out of 47 students, only 3 were regular comics readers. And these are future teachers, and I'm really happy to say that 2 weeks into our unit on comics, we're doing secret. We just did Secret Coders. This week we're doing the Stratford Zoo Midnight Review, Romeo and Juliet, and then we're really fortunate on the week of April 18th to have noted comics creator Barry Deutsch, who's created the Hereville series. He's going to Skype into our class. And,
man.
So already students are saying in their reflections, their weekly reflections, that they're really excited about comics. They thought they weren't going to like them. They love them. But I mean, these are all future teachers. So I really encourage anybody in the Maryland area to go out and listen to Andy, or invite your friends who are curious about comics to do so, because I'm sure your presentation would really be great for that audience.
Well, thanks, Gwen. I hope so. And again, we want to show people what comics are capable of. Mm-hmm. And, there's so much diversity in comics. It's such a broad, it's a big universe, and we want them to know all about it.
Yeah. And I mean, just 2 weeks into it, and a whole bunch of my students are now really excited about comics. So sometimes it just takes that one exposure to get someone excited about it. And then once you start doing the research yourself, you see that almost anything you'd be interested in, there's a comic for. So
mm-hmm. That really is true. It hasn't always been the case, but now, especially with so many creators out there, so many publishers, so many great books, there literally is something for everybody.
Absolutely.
Well, Gwen, are you ready to talk about our first book?
I am ready.
All right. Our first book today is Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales, Alamo All-Stars. And this comes to us from Amulet Books, and it's written actually by Nathan Hale. Not the historical Nathan Hale, but a different one. We'll get to that in just a moment. This is actually the 6th book in the series. And Nathan Hale, he really has a knack for making American history fun and approachable. And he really started this off with his first book called One Dead Spy back in 2012. That was the tale of the American Revolution. He followed that book with other tales about the Civil War ironclad ships, the ill-fated Donner Party of 1846, a book on World War I, a book on the Underground Railroad, and now a book on the Alamo. So a little bit of background about Nathan Hale, the author and illustrator. He was not named for the historical figure Nathan Hale, which we probably remember, Gwen, from our history. Nathan Hale was an American soldier and a spy for the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. He was captured and hung by the British. And that's the whole premise of the Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales books, except that in the graphic novels, just before Nathan Hale is to be hanged, a giant history book swoops down on Nathan Hale, and it grants him this encyclopedic knowledge of American history, past, present, and future. And after that, he tells the two British officers actually it's a provost and a hangman. He tells them, you guys can kill me if you want to, but you're never going to hear the story of how you're going to lose the Revolutionary War. And, of course, they can't imagine that. And he tells them the tale of the Revolutionary War, how it's going to end. And they're amazed. And we get to the end of the book, and they say, well, we can't kill you right now. It's the end of the book. We'll kill you next time. And, of course, Hale just keeps spinning these tales about American history, things that haven't taken place yet. And they're enthralled. We're enthralled. They're so much fun, and they're just amazing books. And this one is no exception. So this book is about the Alamo, about how it got started. And Gwen, I have to tell you, I lived in Texas for several years. And although I never took a course in Texas history, it was, and probably still is, a requirement for all kids going to school in Texas.
Okay. And
I know that the students that I taught as a band director, they complained more about Texas history than any other subject by a long shot. And Texas history, it seems so convoluted, so confusing, and practically just incomprehensible. Plus, it's so big. But the thing about Nathan Hale is he's taken this part of American history and he's made it not only approachable, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do agree with you that this was a subject that was really complex. I'm just going to say on pages 10 and 11 of the comic, thankfully there's a chart that shows everyone at the time that this was going on in the sort of early part of the 19th century who had some sort of stake in Texas. And I just was like, wow, this is, it's a great overview for kids. So I know kids are just going to really, you don't even need a lot of prior knowledge about Texas history or about that time period to really get so much out of this book.
Yeah, I agree. And with all of the books that Hale does, he does exactly what you said on those 2 pages. He lays out all of the players, and you can see visually, and the 2 pages you selected are excellent pages because it shows not only who they are, but where they are geographically, so that you can visually understand where these parts are on the map and who is there. He does such a great job of making it just so clear.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, too, that it is a book on history, but there's a great deal of humor involved. It's a very serious subject, and yet he manages to bring humanity to it and humor. And so I think that even if you're a young reader, or if you're a young reader listening and maybe history isn't necessarily your favorite subject, if you like comedy, if you like humor, if you like to get a sense for how absolutely complicated life can be for adults who are trying to sort things out, this makes a really great addition. I have to say, just true confession time, Andy, when I was a kid, I was obsessed with history. So I'm actually a poor reader of this insofar as I love it so much that it just was playing right into my interests. As a matter of fact, I was so obsessed with Theodore Roosevelt that I wrote a biography of him when I was 9 or 10 years old.
Really?
Yeah, and for my vacation, summer vacation, my parents took me to his home on Long Island so that I could go to the museum there. That's how obsessed I was on that particular point in history. And then I went on to write my dissertation on the Progressive Era. So I share with Nathan Hale a true love of American history, but he is so talented in bringing it not out just for the kids like me who are total history nerds, but for kids who maybe don't have that innate love of history, but will find many other things to find enjoyable in this comic.
And Gwen, I'm glad you mentioned the humor that's there. I mean, there's such a great balance of history and humor and adventure, and we get so much of all of that. But Hale also puts in some things in there that actually makes kids stop and think. I mean, a lot of kids might read over some of these things, but I'll give you for instance. There's on page 18. There's a situation where Stephen F. Austin's friend is talking to him about a new law from the Mexican president, Bustamante, and Texas was a Mexican territory at this time. And his friend says that there's been this decree that there's going to be no more immigration to Texas from America. And he says, first they stop immigration, then they'll kick us out. We could lose everything we've built here. And again, this is one of those sections where a lot of kids might just read over that, but a lot of them are going to make the connection. People are talking about immigration now just like they were then. It was a problem then. It's a problem now. How did they deal with it then? What are we going to do with it now? And kids are going to be able to kind of sink into that and see that there's more to this than just, what a lot of people would say is just a tired old history book. It's relevant. Not only is it fun and it's humorous, it's relevant.
Yeah, I'm sure that one of the reasons that he picked this subject matter was that he wanted to give young readers a sense for the complexity of Mexican history. We very often in the United States only think of things from the U.S. perspective. This gives us an understanding not only of how borders are drawn, how sometimes those are arbitrary, how, decisions are made that profoundly impact people's lives, their livelihoods, oftentimes from remote leaders who are not intimately involved in what's going on in a region. I guess the overarching point is if a young person is a sensitive reader, this is going to lead them to want to read a lot more about this subject matter and to look at our current immigration issues in a new light.
Definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned the what goes into the books, because like all of the Nathan Hale books, the final pages include information about the key players and, of course, Nathan's probably most famous part of his book, The Research Babies. And this is actually a group of babies who are in charge of doing Nathan Hale's research. And it's a lot of fun. He has a lot of fun with that. And there's a very generous list of books for kids and adults who want to pursue more about whatever the subject matter is at hand. And Gwen, one of the things that really amazes me is, I tell kids about these books all the time in the library, and I tell their parents. And a lot of times the parents will come back and they'll kind of lean forward and they'll whisper, I didn't really know anything about this part of history. This was really, really good. And I feel like I kind of know a little something now. And I'm like, well, great. My work is done. So the adults are really enjoying these, I think, just as much as the kids are.
I certainly enjoyed it. This is a part of history, I'll admit, that I don't know a lot about. I've only been to Texas a couple of times. And, like I said, I was very interested in more contemporary American history. So I felt like I was aware of many of the characters who emerge, especially Davy Crockett, because I've also studied American folklore and I'm interested in that subject matter. But I learned a lot about him that I didn't know. And again, but it's in a way that it's seamless. I think I admit, I'm a pretty quick reader, and I know that if I were actually writing on this comic, I would need to reread it a couple more times. But I was able to get through it, understand it, enjoy it, really felt like I took something away from it in only a couple of hours. And so to me, if I had a young reader in my life, I'd be sitting down and maybe we'd read it together, because there's a lot of humor and a lot of details that you can notice that would be fun to share with someone.
Yeah, definitely. And listeners might also be interested in knowing that Abrams, the publisher whose imprint is Amulet, also has lesson plans linking these books to middle grade history curriculums. Mm-hmm. And, Gwen, I don't think it's too much to say that Nathan Hale has probably single-handedly made American history fun for countless kids and adults.
Absolutely. And I also want to say that these are very sophisticated comics. That doesn't mean that you need to have a lot of experience reading the comics to understand them. I mean more that when they bring in a lot of different stylistic choices that make it interesting to look at. For one thing, I was looking on page 37 where Hale is describing the way that cholera, the disease cholera, began to move across this region and really, was felling people left and right. It was a terrible epidemic. And he chooses to personify cholera as a mini-skulled sort of lizard-type, dragon-type creature. Mm-hmm. And that's actually very consistent with the way that political cartoonists in the 19th century would draw something like this. And so you're also getting that a taste not only of Hale's own style and his own way of putting things forward, but you're also getting just these little sort of hints back or throwing back to a previous style of cartooning that was very common in U.S. newspapers. And it really gives it an authentic feel as you're looking at the comic.
Yeah, it really does. And you know that Hale has spent a lot of time. He knows all of those eras of comics history, and he knows that is a type of technique that's going to work really, really well.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about this series. I wish that they were available when I was a kid.
Yeah, I wish they were too. I might have had better grades in history if they had.
Absolutely. I could actually see someone doing very well at a history exam after reading this book. It's a great way to read about history.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot of fun, and again, we hope that you will take advantage of the Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales. So, Gwen, would you like to tell us about the next book we're going to be talking about today?
Absolutely. It's Faith Erin Hicks' highly anticipated The Nameless City, which she has created as a fantasy text, but it's a fantasy text that is based upon what she claims to be just years of research into Chinese history. And so we'll get more to that in a second. But before we talk about the comic proper, I also want to give credit to Jordi Belair, who is the colorist for The Nameless City. And Faith Erin Hicks has said in many interviews that her contributions have been really significant to the comic. And I think that when our readers actually get a hold of it and start to read through it, they're going to see what a profound role that color plays in creating both an atmosphere for the comic and also furthering the narrative, because even though there's a lot of dialogue in this comic, there are whole stretches which are not, which are brought forward by the images alone, and very often color plays a big role in the way that we're responding to those images. So I want to make sure that we give Jordi Belair her credit up front for that. This is a text that is a young adult graphic novel. Probably, Andy, would you say middle school range would be probably the intended audience, middle school and up?
I think we have it in the teen section, but I don't think there's anything that would keep it out of the middle grade section, because it's I know we're going to talk about the contents of it, the violence level, but I think younger readers would probably be well served by reading this. Yeah, and there's nothing in it that I think would be super objectionable in that way. No. It reminds me of a lot of comics that have been created for that age range. So I think really, middle grade, high school readers will enjoy this comic. And just to sort of give our readers a bit of background on Faith Erin Hicks, she has been probably one of the most active and prolific comics creators for young readers over the last decade. She's created The Adventures of Superhero Girl, for which she received an Eisner Award in 2013. Her graphic novel Friends with Boys is super popular. She's done a great deal of drawing on other series, and so she's just one of those not only accomplished artists, but someone who puts a great deal of research and work into her comics, and it's great to see her being able to put forward what will be a trilogy. The Nameless City is the first of 3 texts. It's basically a text that's set in a what one might call an Asian sort of setting, but there isn't a specific attachment to any countries or places that we would be able to identify on a map. It's actually a land in which there's a major city that has a river that runs through it called the River of Lives that goes out into the ocean. And in the region of that city, there are 3 kingdoms. And each kingdom at one point or another has gone through this city, taken it over, and given it a new name based upon its particular culture. But the people who have always lived there and are indigenous to that place have gotten to the point where they simply call it the Nameless City, because to them, even if the names change, their life circumstances typically do not. And so that's the setting for this, what turns out to be a really vast, epic comic. And the 2 central protagonists in the text are young people who meet under interesting circumstances. The first character is Kai, and he is a young man who's grown up in the Dao Kingdom, which is the kingdom that currently is ruling the Nameless City. And his father is a well-known and respected general, and Kai goes to the Nameless City to begin training to become a warrior and to continue to defend the Dao Kingdom's hold on the Nameless City. But there's a bit of a problem because Kai does not like warfare. He's not interested in that. What he would love to do is to sit in a library and read books and become a learned person. That's truly his passion. Mm-hmm. The other protagonist is named Rat, and she is a street urchin who has lost both of her parents. And I don't want to give too much more away about that because that's a theme that I think we'll learn more about as the series progresses. But she currently lives in a monastery and spends her days foraging and basically running the streets of Nameless City. And the action of this text takes place when these 2 characters are brought together and end up interacting in a way that basically brings about, one might hope, a little bit more harmony amongst the people who have
basically colonized the Nameless City and the people who have always lived there. So there's another theme here, really, Andy, about immigration, about conquest, and about the sort of conflicts that can occur when a ruling power comes in and tries to legislate the lives of people who have always lived in a particular area. And you have two young characters, one who's been a benefactor of the financial gains that the Dao Kingdom has gotten from the conquest, and then you meet Rat, who her life has been deeply negatively impacted by the conquest. And so it's an interesting clash of individuals. And since Faith Erin Hicks often writes about friendships and about the relationships between and among young people, it's sort of exciting to see this tradition continuing, but in a setting that is gorgeous. And maybe you'll want to talk a little bit about that, because it's a beautiful comic to look at. And in a setting that, however, in other ways, does gesture towards current conflicts that we have in the global world today.
It certainly does address those issues in some of the same ways that Nathan Hale uses history to address some current issues as well. And Gwen, we've seen all the time comics or books or movies about two kids from either opposite worlds or opposite sides of the track, and they have like a tenuous relationship at best at first, and then they get to become friends. This isn't one of those stories in which really two kids from the opposite side of the track initially hate each other and become best buds. It's way more complicated than that. And like you said, what we have is not only the clash of these two characters, but a clash of several cultures, because everyone who has conquered this city has left a part of their people there and a part of their culture. So it's truly a multicultural story, because you really have these different cultures vying for, what is this city going to be called? It's the Nameless City, but we have all of these elements of other cultures and other backgrounds. I don't want to say it's a complicated book, because it's easy to understand, but the little tendrils that run through this make this a really, really rich read. It's not a simple story. It's a very graspable story, but it's very rich. It's very subtle. And it's not just about mismatched characters. It goes way, way beyond that.
Absolutely. And I think, too, that this is one of those comics where there are a number of adults who are portrayed in the comic. You get a sense for the power struggles that are occurring in the governing Dao court, where basically the generals are trying to contend with the idea that maybe they're moving to a less bellicose society, that they're evolving into a society where perhaps more attention should be put to things like social justice, etc., rather than just simply conquest. But they're having trouble doing that. And so you not only get the perspective of the children in the comic, but you can see the conflicts and issues that the adults are working through themselves. And I think that adds a real richness to the text. It gives the story space that Faith Erin Hicks has created, I think, a lot more substance and depth. And I will also mention, I just would like to quote from her actually directly, because I know that many of our readers maybe are familiar with other fantasy texts that are set in Central Asia, and they may be wondering the sort of research that Faith Erin Hicks did to create this text. She says that, writing about the Dao, who are the dynasty that Kai comes from. The Dao are a nation of conquerors, and now they're facing the possibility of their culture evolving into something less warlike. The question is, how will the people in power respond to that? She said, I read a pretty decent stack of nonfiction books while developing this comic. She was particularly interested in 14th century China and the things that were going on there politically and socially, especially when the grandson of Genghis Khan began ruling in China. And she says she read this whole stack of books. She said, I think I only used like 0.1% of what I've read, made it into the book, but I felt the research really helped give the story its supporting foundation. And so, it's true. It's interesting, Andy. One of the books that this reminds me a lot of is Jean Lewin Yang's amazing work of historical fiction, Boxers and Saints, which came out in 2013.
Yes.
And that's a 2-volume text in which you get the two sides of the Boxer Rebellion. One side is one of the young men who becomes part of the Society of the Harmonious Fists and is fighting to move foreigners out of China. And then on the other hand, you get a young woman who has been taken in by the Catholic Church and becomes a convert and is trying to support that. And you have their clash. This text reminds me a little bit of that. There's ways in which you can see a correspondence between two characters. But of course, this text is very different. It's a fantasy text. It's dealing with some of those themes. But in this instance, the two characters end up finding something in common, that they share certain values in common and are able to act on those. And so it's a more, at least up till this point, a more uplifting text. But of course, we have 2 more volumes. So you get a sense for where Faith Erin Hicks is going with it. But, we won't know until all 3 are published.
Right, and I think that's a really, really good comparison to Boxers and Saints because, as you said, there's so many parallels to it. I read the same article. In fact, I think you shared it with me, the article that she's interviewed in. And one of the things that she says, I don't know if it was in this book or in this interview or another one, that this was such a departure for her to write and illustrate this story because most of her work takes place, with high school backdrops or, having to do with the modern era. And she said in the interview that she was looking for a story that didn't involve drawing high schools or a lot of high school lockers.
I loved that part.
and there's no lockers here, but there are an awful lot of tiled rooftops and buildings. So I don't know if she feels the same way about tiled rooftops or not. But you mentioned the art before, Gwen, and the art is just astounding, not only in the level of detail and not just in the tiled rooftops, but the buildings, the whole city. You really do feel that Hicks has created this entire different world. It's completely foreign to us, but it's one that we can understand. And again, as you said, her research has really, really paid off well. One of the things that I like about her work, and I noticed it too in her the Superhero Girl book that she did a few years ago, which was an excellent book. She has a really, really great way of showing movement. And this book has a lot of movement. Running is a very important component of the book. We don't want to get too much into that, but the way that she lays her panels out, like I'm looking on like page 102, 103, and Kai and Rat are kind of, this isn't telling you too much, but they're engaged in this race. And the way that she lays her panels out, the eye naturally moves in the right direction, and she has the characters going in a way that's very, very natural. Sometimes it shifts, but it makes sense to our eyes. And especially if you're a young reader and maybe you even haven't read that many comics and graphic novels, she does such a good job of showing you how this is moving forward in just with her artwork. And not only that, but she has the appropriate expressions on the characters' faces, the way the panels are laid out. They're not always, like traditional panels. She's really, really constructed this in a way that not only tells the story well, but it keeps the eye moving and it tells you more than what's on the page. You really get a feel for what's going on here.
Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting that you were saying before, this particular setting that she creates is very detailed. And as you said, it also it's not specific enough that you could say, oh, this is here or this is there. And in a way that reminds me of Sean Tan's book, The Arrival. That's the wordless graphic novel that follows the experiences of a number of immigrants who move to this new land where they hope to have more opportunity. All of them have come from repressive regimes and are having the opportunity to see this new place, to carve out a life for themselves and to bring their families over. So again, immigration. So it's not surprising. What's really useful here is at the beginning of the comic, it's focalized through Kai. And he's come to the Nameless City for the first time. He's never been there before. He's heard about it, but he's never seen it. And his father takes him on a walk through the city. And as a result, we're looking at that city through his eyes. In other words, it's a place that's entirely new to him, and it's a place that's entirely new to us. So again, that theme of coming to a new place, trying to understand what one's role is in that place. In Kai's instance, one of the last things he sees on the streets are homeless children who look very hungry. And obviously he's getting a sense, maybe for the first time in his life, of what it's like to be in a place where one's meals aren't guaranteed, where resources aren't, in abundance for everyone. And so it also gives the reader a chance to think about those issues as well. So it's a very relatable comic in that sense. So even though we don't know the specific place, it's obviously a fantasy place that Hicks has created. We are still allowed to think about ways that place is telling us things about the world we live in not only in the United States, but globally.
Mm-hmm. And Gwen, I want to echo what you said about Jordi Belair's colors. This would be a good book if it were in black and white, but oh my gosh, the colors just bring this to a whole nother level. She does amazing work. I mean, she's done amazing work throughout her career. This is just really spectacular color work.
The warm tones, the cool tones, the way they alternate, sometimes even on the same page. There's a beautiful page 143 I'm looking at, and it's a point at which Kai is looking at a festival that's occurring in the street, and it's at night. And the way that he's running through the darkened streets to get to the festival, but then when he's there, he comes around a corner, and it's just the most beautiful, glowing scene. And the last panel on the page is a picture of him looking at it and saying, "Oh, wow." And I was laughing when I was reading this myself, because I had the exact same reaction in terms of it's all through the color.
And that's an amazing page, and we get to that page, and he does see that one panel of all the color, and I was saying, "Oh wow," at the same place you were, and then you turn the page, and it's really, oh wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just spectacular.
It's just so very beautiful, and I'm excited that Hicks and Belair are having the chance to bring this forward, and both of them have had great success in the past. Obviously, Hicks winning the Eisner was a super big deal and very deserved. But I think this is a series that is going to be not only popular, but also is so beautifully done. It will introduce another generation of young readers to the amazing way that story space can unfold in an epic comic like this, where it's clear that the comics creator has spent so much time sort of thinking about this world, creating it with such loving detail, and then putting forward characters who are relatable, interesting, funny, and who are going through some really difficult things that will help our young readers get a sense for what our friendships really mean, and how where we're born, what sort of things we were given as we enter this world deeply impact how we relate to other people.
Yeah, and I can't wait for the next two installments. And Hicks has said that book 2 of The Nameless City, and I quote here, book 2 of The Nameless City is going to be bonkers. I think I've upped my game in terms of drawing the world, so hopefully it'll look super gorgeous. Well, it looks pretty super gorgeous right now, so I can't wait to see what she's going to do next.
And really, it's a tale where the city itself has had so many cultures move through it. There's so many people who live in that city, so just the cityscapes themselves, the people who inhabit them, are fascinating, and it takes the concept of diversity to a new place, I think, because you could really see how different people come from different areas, bring what they think is the most important thing to put onto this nameless city, but how that then just they become one of many voices that have created the city. What will be interesting to see is what happens with the power balance, because one of the key things that comes out in this text and that came out in the Nathan Hale text as well is when people are living in an area, especially if they're indigenous to that area, and they have had to withstand all sorts of incursions and shifts in their culture, etc., that can be an incredibly painful thing, and finding ways for those folks to have a voice and to have self-determination is, I think, one of the key themes of this series as we move forward. So there's a lot to look forward, both visually, but also, I think, thematically.
I think so too. Well, Gwen, we've talked about 2 books, and we've got 1 to go. And I don't know about you, but, well, I know, but because you don't drink coffee, but I could sure use some caffeination right now. And, what you could do is you could pause this podcast and you could go get some coffee that you've ordered from
justcoffee.coop.
That's right. So you need to be caffeinated when you're reading your comics. So if you want to hit the pause button right now, we will understand, and you can go to the website of our sponsor, Just Coffee, justcoffee.coop. Use the coupon code COMICS for a 10% discount. Enjoy free shipping and help out the comics alternative.
Absolutely. And remember, this is coffee that's 100% fair trade. It's shade grown. It's organic certified. It's roasted in small batches when you order it, and there is no minimum order. One other thing I would say, Andy, is that they do have chocolate and they do have tea, and I like both of those things. And so I also really say go to justcoffee.coop. You'll be helping them and you'll be helping us. So.
That's right. There's lots of good stuff there.
Yep.
Well, Gwen, we got one more book to talk about, and that is Paper Girls, Volume 1, from Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chang. And this is a collection of Paper Girls issues number 1 through 5 from Image Comics.
Wow. Andy, I so enjoyed this comic, and I have to say that one of the things that was most enjoyable is it's set in 1988. And the characters at the time that the text takes place are 12 years old. There's 4 young women who are paper carriers who get up at 3 or 4 in the morning to deliver these papers in their neighborhood. And in the first 3 or 4 pages alone, there were all sorts of things sitting around their homes that were things that I had when I was a young person in the 1980s, including this gunned bear that was really popular and those awesome Bic pens that had the 4 different pen colors in them.
Oh,
Remember those?
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed that, but like on the 3rd or 4th page, there's one of those sitting on one of the characters' desks. And so just in terms of if you're a reader who's interested, what was it really like in the 80s? While this is not a comic that stays in the real world very long, we have the intrusion of all sorts of aliens and extraterrestrials and things like that going on. So it's not like it, but it's grounded in a very realistic 1980s landscape, including the video games that kids are playing, the books they're reading, and things like that. And I found that to be pretty enjoyable. I don't know about you, but I thought it was pretty neat.
I did too. This Gwen, this is about the time that I started my teaching career. So, I wasn't, and actually Brian K. Vaughan in one of his interviews, he talks about the memories of being 12 years old when
right
during this time, and I'm actually several years older than Brian, so I remember teaching kids there, and so much of it, I was around those kids a lot, and it's not only is it right on target, and I know this is one of the things we want to talk about as far as the culture of that time, but also some of the darkness of that time. Mm-hmm. I mean, we tend to think of the 80s as kind of, in some ways kind of carefree times for kids, and there were a lot of carefree things going on, but there's a lot of darkness in there too, which this book approaches and touches on. Well, the setup of the book is, as Gwen said, it's 1988, and it's in the early morning hours of November the 1st, the day after Halloween, in Stony Stream, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cleveland, which is actually where Brian K. Vaughan is from. Oh. And a 12-year-old girl named Erin has just started delivering the Cleveland Preserver newspaper, and she meets 3 other 12-year-old girls who also have paper routes. There's Tiffany, KJ, and a tough girl called Mac. And even this early in the morning on the day after Halloween, there's some really strange things that are still going on, including a strange group of guys wearing cloaks and hoods, a strange device that nobody can figure out in a strange house, and the apparent disappearance of most of the town's adults. Now, I think even Brian K. Vaughan himself, Gwen, has called this book kind of a cross between The War of the Worlds and Stand By Me.
Yeah.
Which is really a pretty good way to describe it. But, it does contain elements of those stories. But the thing about Brian K. Vaughan is he's never predictable and he's always intriguing. And one of the things that I don't like about his books is I finish them way too quickly. and this one was no exception.
Well, I was a paper girl myself, and one of the things that this text touches upon is this was the generation of young women who were first taking on those roles. When I started my paper route in, I would have been, I think I was 13 years old, so this would have been in the mid to late 70s, and I was the only girl I knew who had a paper route, and I had some things happen on that route that were actually kind of scary, including this was really kind of a sad story, but we used to have to not only deliver the papers every day, but we had to collect the fees ourselves. It was before the days when people would just pay the company. And so we would have to go up to all these doors where we delivered papers and ask people for money. If you stop and think about the way that kids are so protected today, this was a very different kind of world. I was pretty much off on my own on my bike, delivering my papers, collecting money, giving it over to the newspaper when I was still in middle school. And on one particular occasion, I did have an elderly gentleman attack me and try to throw himself on me, and I had to sort of fight back. And it was a really, on the one hand, an extremely traumatic experience, but on the other hand, it was a learning experience too. I did get away. I was able to, call my parents. They were able to deal with the situation with the authorities, and everything turned out okay. It turned out that this was a gentleman who really needed some help and some, some home help. He was very elderly, so I want to be clear about this. But it was a pretty intense experience. And so one of the things that really felt real to me about this text is very early on, these young women make it clear that they have banded together in a way because going door to door, delivering papers, asking people for money can sometimes lead to some really tough situations. And I think that one of the things that Vaughan does really effectively is make this comic not only feel very real to the time period, but provide a bit of a contrast to the way that we think about young people today and what they should be doing in the world, etc. So I felt a sense of real connection to the characters and to their situation right away.
Yeah, I did too, and again, I remember you and I think are around the same age, but there is a lot of, and actually Brian K. Vaughan mentioned this in one of his interviews. He said that there's a lot of dark sadness in the late 80s, and he said I was trying to be as honest as I could about that period, and he does capture a lot of that darkness. And again, this is the time I was teaching kids in school, and I saw some of that darkness and sadness even in the midst of the popular cultural landmarks that were kind of like happy and carefree, like Pee Wee Herman and the Bangles. I'm sorry, I'm taking a little 80s trip here. But, there were things like that, but there was that little hidden darkness that's going on. And he's exploring that in some ways. It's not just a science fiction graphic novel. That's certainly in there. But he's also talking about how things are. There are some strained relationships with parents, with authority figures in general. So he's doing a lot of different things here that we tend to ignore when we're thinking about the 80s, I guess.
Andy, I really want to second what you've been saying about the realism in this text. And it appears not just in terms of how the characters respond to aliens and sort of things like that once the story really becomes clearly embedded in science fiction. Even in the first couple of pages where we're getting to know the characters, one of them has a nightmare that's clearly inspired by something that's going on within her own family. And it's a very disturbing nightmare. So these aren't characters who are, just having everything is perfect and funny, or like they're in a John Hughes film where the biggest deal is who's going to go to what dance with whom. Mm-hmm. This is a really, I think, very realistic depiction of middle and lower middle class life in the Middle West at this time period.
Yeah, definitely. It's certainly not And I'm glad you mentioned the John Hughes movies, because actually I saw an article with Brian K. Vaughan where he said he wanted to avoid any references to that. And he does have some references to some other things, like there's a Monster Squad poster and, a couple of other things. There's a Far Side cartoon. But, he does stay away from some of those obvious things like the John Hughes movies. But again, that you're right. There is this undercurrent where things are not quite, safe and happy all the way through. At the same time, the book is filled with a certain level of innocence, because these still are 12-year-old girls, and there's a lot that they don't know about the world. But there are also, again, some things that are more mature, including language. I mean, there's this isn't a book that's filled with profanity or anything like that, but there are a couple of F words in there. So this is something that's probably, in fact, Image has it marketed as a teen plus book, but parents should be aware that this isn't something for little kids.
Yes, and also some of the dreams that one of the characters has there's some things in it that are sort of frightening, could be frightening to a younger reader. I do think that again, anything that happens in this comic in terms of language or imagery is really appropriate to the story space.
Absolutely.
So, I don't want to suggest that it's gratuitous or that it's not. It works well. This is a beautiful narrative. I just think that probably for our teen readers, our older teen readers especially, that's really the audience that you get a sense that Vaughan and Chang are working towards. And maybe we should talk a little bit for just a moment about the beautiful imagery and color in this comic as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
This is a comic where color is also useful in, I think, especially once we get to the parts of the text where the science fiction elements appear, and you're getting a sense that there's possibly an alien presence, and a lot of the things that point towards that involve machines, colors, things like that. And in a way, it helps us to understand what's happening. There's a couple of really great scenes midway through the comic that were reminiscent to me, actually, of Watchmen. Which for me is really high praise, because that's one of my favorite comics, and when it comes to color especially. And so, I would really say that in terms of drawing and color, Cliff Chang has done an amazing job creating a story space that, even though it brings in a lot of situations which seem, like not necessarily plausible in the real world that we live in right now, it just integrates well into the story space, so that you actually feel that, wow, this could really be happening to these characters, and their responses seem, absolutely spot on. And also, I will just say, I don't know if you saw this, Andy, but there are a number of points in the text where Vaughan and Chang will focus on one character's response to a situation, and then show a moment where that character is reflecting, either through dreams or through meditation, about what's happened. And so even though it's a very fast-paced comic, there are these moments of character development and depth, which I think make this more than just sort of a run-of-the-mill action-adventure comic. There's a lot going on here, and the pace of the text is such that you might go through a busy action-adventure scene, but then you're also given that space, both visual space and also text, to think about how what has transpired really is impacting the various characters.
Gwen, it's interesting, too. I don't buy a lot of individual issues, a lot of single issues, but I bought this in individual issues, and it was almost painful waiting for the next installment to come out. And one of the reasons is because, as you said, there is that great character development, and there are the moments where we step back a bit and we learn a little bit more about these characters, and then the story moves on. And then reading the single issues, you had to wait a month to find out what's going to happen next. You don't have to do that with this, obviously, but there is such a great amount, as you said, of character development, especially in the first part of the book. And I don't really mean this as a criticism, but there's so much action, I think, like in issues 3, 4, and 5 in this book, that and it's not to say that we don't get character development, but I think most of the bulk of what we get is in the first couple of issues of character development. I imagine he's going to expand that more as we get further into the next issues and next volumes. But yeah, there's definitely some richness of character here. I also wanted to do a quick, as we did with Jordi Belair, a shout out to Matt Wilson, who does the Kellers here that you mentioned. Just outstanding work. And I don't know if this is my interpretation of it or misinterpretation of it, but it seems like that every time there's a dream sequence or a flashback or something really, really weird going on, that we have a lot of colors represented. And when it's kind of like normalcy, it's kind of a few colors, like some pinks, purples, oranges. I don't know if that's something that Wilson is consciously doing with the book, but it really resonated with me.
Yeah, and I think that whenever there's interaction between the protagonists and the sort of people they end up meeting, whose status they're not entirely sure of, that color does play a role in helping us to interpret the seriousness of a situation. And I really enjoyed that too. I picked up on that. It's really hard, Andy, because I don't want to give too much away. There's a lot that we could say about this comic, but I really would like to leave it up to the readers to enjoy it as much as we did in terms of reading it, anticipating, wondering what's going to happen next. And it's exciting to know that actually I went ahead and ordered some of the single issues that have come out subsequent to the ones that are collected here, because I can't wait for the next collected volume. So you're right. I mean, it's one of those gripping series that bring, for one thing, I will simply say this. There are ways in which the current time period in which we are living, it makes an appearance in this comic. I think that's fair to say without giving away too much. Yeah. And so yet again, this is the third comic that we've talked about this week where young readers are encouraged not only to think about how things might have happened in the past, but also to think about how what they're reading is in dialogue with what's going on in their lives right now. And I find that to be a rich connection between all three comics.
Me too. And, one of the things that I really, really like about Brian K. Vaughan is not only his writing. I mean, he's an excellent storyteller and clearly one of the best in comics today, maybe the best. But the way he pairs himself up with artists that are so appropriate for the book that he's on. And he's done lots of different books, and each artist brings a different thing to the table. And I think Cliff Chiang is probably the perfect artist for this book. And if you haven't seen much of his work before, one of the best titles that he's done is Wonder Woman. Right. When they started the New 52, just excellent work. So I highly recommend his work too. Gwen, I think parents should know too, as we said, this is a book for teens. And if your teenager likes it, there are other Brian K. Vaughan books that are teen friendly, and there are books that are not teen friendly. So if your teenager does like this, some other Brian K. Vaughan books that are appropriate would be Runaways from Marvel. That's been out for several years and is a great series. Yeah,
super popular series.
Yeah, super popular. Also, Pride of Baghdad is excellent. And he's done a lot of good work for Marvel, too, in the past. And one of my favorites is Doctor Strange, The Oath. Doctor Strange is one of my favorite characters. So there's a lot of good Brian K. Vaughan for teen readers, but be aware that there's also some of his work that's not appropriate for teens.
Right. Our librarian coming to the rescue.
That's right. Oh wow! Well, Gwen, these were three. That's the thing I love about doing this podcast is we got three completely different books, yet we were able to find some commonality between all of these books, besides them being just great creations.
Yeah, I want folks to understand. I mean, we try to find books that have a lot of variety that we feel are going to really take off and be popular, but we don't have a lot of we don't have some rubric that we've set up so that we're churning out texts that have correspondences. But one of the first things I thought about last night when I was preparing for our talk today was wow, yet again, we found 3 comics that set entirely different places, one place that's entirely fictitious, and yet the same sort of themes and ideas coming up of, like, what does it mean to be indigenous to a place? What happens if someone comes to that place that tries to change your way of life? These are really key questions, and it's nice to see that comics creators across the board with different styles and even for different age ranges are asking those kinds of questions and encouraging young readers to think about them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about comics is they're not only entertaining, but they do make you think. They make you think past the page. It's just great.
It is.
Well, we hope that you will check these books out, and when you do check them out, one of the ways you can check out at least 2 of these books is by going to DCB Service or their sister company, In Stock Trades, where you'll find lots of great titles at huge discounts, including The Nameless City, which we spoke about today, which you can get for $10.49, and that's 30% off the cover price at DCB Service. You can also find Paper Girls at $5.99, only $5.99. That's a 40% savings off the cover price. And when you do get your comics there, get in touch with us and let us know what you think. You can contact us by going to our website at comicsalternative.com, and on the right-hand side of your browser, you'll see a tab that reads Send Voicemail. Click on that, and from the comfort of your own desktop or mobile device, you can send us a message through the wonders of SpeakPipe. Or, if you want to contact us the old school way, you can also call us on the telephone at 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427. Or, if you want to email us, that's cool too. You can contact us at the number 2guys at comicsalternative.com, or you can get in touch with us individually. I'm Wolverton at comicsalternative.com. And Gwen, how can people reach you?
Folks can reach me at Gwen at comicsalternative.com. You can also find us on Twitter, where we announce new content to our podcast and updates to our blog. And on Twitter, we're at the number 2 guys with PhDs.
That's right. You can also find us on Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, and Pinterest. And even now, Gwen, I just found out from listening to a podcast that I think maybe you were on, we can access the Comics Alternative through
Goodreads, and also Spotify.
Spotify, isn't that amazing? Mm-hmm. That is so cool. I'm very excited about that.
Absolutely.
We even have a YouTube channel, so you can access us that way. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes, stream us on Stitcher, and you can find us on TuneIn. And you can discover every single one of our episodes, as well as our reviews and comics-related commentary on the blog at comicsalternative.com.
Wow, well, it's been a great show. I've really enjoyed these comics. I hope everyone who has listened to us today will go out and get them and read them. And next month, we'll have more exciting comics content for you.
That's right. So join us then. And until next time, I'm Andy.
And I'm Gwen. See you soon.
Bye.